Welcome to the Zayari Wellness Podcast, where we learn about other people's journeys. Regardless of age, race, religion, or status, we're all just human and have one thing in common: the ups and downs of life. Join me in welcoming our special guest, Laura, as we explore when mental health and religion collide.
Hi guys, my name is Laura Spencer. I am a stay-at-home mom to 4 kiddos. I am also the wife of a truck driver. I don't know. I am 30 years old. That's kind of weird to say now, but
Big 30.
for sure. But I am, and I am a follower of Yeshua, Jesus Christ, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so happy that you're here and that you decided to be on this podcast. And I know that religion can be a sensitive topic for a lot of people. And for all of my supporters or those listening, we don't necessarily want to promote a specific religion, but we want to highlight what happens with religion
Mm,
and mental health. And we just would love to educate the audience about the balance of having religion or having faith and beliefs and mental health, and how the two can either commingle or sometimes clash
mm.
with each other. And so, Laura, can you tell us a little bit about your own journey, mental health journey, or your own spiritual journey, and how they kind of collided?
Sure. So, I did not grow up in the church. Mm, mm, when I was in 8th grade, a classmate of mine passed away, and
Mm,
that alone was so incredibly traumatic, and that catapulted me into figuring out what life is about. Because
mhm.
that, as an 8th grader, that is um, one of the most bizarre things to happen to someone so young.
Yeah.
And so, a friend of mine invited me to her youth group, and that's when I started my relationship with Christ, literally that same day. And um, man, it's been a roller coaster. When if anyone tries to convince you that having a relationship with Christ is this, rainbows and unicorns and all of that all the time, it is not. You go through ups and downs like any relationship, and I've had a couple of ups and downs in my life. Some were in college. Some were after I became a mom. So yeah.
That's a
Um,
tough journey all on its own.
oh my goodness, these toddlers.
You have 4 kids.
I
How do
got four
you
kiddos.
let's sidetrack a little bit. How do you balance having 4 children?
When they tell you, when after you have, like, I think it's like after two, maybe it might be after three, but I hear all the time, after you have 2 kids, like, you can have as many kids as you need, as you want. Because once you get like the routine down, it's routine. We were just talking about it. It's creating a routine that they understand what's coming up next, what's happening. Um, Always communicating. I don't baby talk my kiddos. Like, I try to have
Mhm,
conversation with them, talk them through
mhm.
their feelings and all of that. But honestly, I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't go back and do it differently or
Yeah.
anything like that. I love my kids, and I love helping them build the life that God has for them one day, and navigating them through their, what we hear now, big feelings and all of that. So,
Right. As in our culture, too much, you're doing the most, right? Those are big feelings, you're doing the
yeah, I
most.
mean, if you want to be blunt about it, which sometimes with these kids you might have to be, but yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So you went through your own journey and you said that you started your spiritual journey around 8th grade. Was it somebody
Mhm.
close to you? Was it somebody you knew, or was it just a classmate and you kind of just started pondering about life and the meaning of life?
So for me, it was like my very first loss. I've had family members and stuff that had passed away before this, but no one that I knew.
Mm.
His name was Jacob Odell Heath, and hopefully some of my Albright middle school, friends will see this and kind of remember. But yeah, he was just a classmate and a good friend. I'd had him in a couple of classes, both 7th and 8th grade, but everyone in our school knew him. He was the popular basketball player, and he was mixed, but we all called him the white boy, you know. So yeah, but he was very friendly and very charismatic and outgoing, and so we weren't like super close, we weren't like BFFs, but I knew him fairly well, and yeah, I could say that he was like my first big loss. I hadn't
Mm.
experienced anything like that before him.
Yeah. And I think it's a little bit difficult with the grieving process, especially when you're so young and you're a
Mm.
teenager, like your hormones are already all over the place. And then
Oh yeah.
experiencing grief on top of that is very difficult. And so
Mm.
somebody close to you passed away, and then you were like, I need to go to church, or the timing of your friend inviting you kind of fell right in.
So I would say it was I went through a few months of, I think, a little bit of anger and
Mhm.
a whole lot of confusion, and no one was answering my questions. You know, it was
Mm.
kind of like, oh, this is just how life is, and just those very I don't even know how to describe them. They're
The,
just they
the
they don't they
general, the
don't they
general
don't answer.
statement.
Yeah, yeah, the general very plain answers. They don't really answer your question. They just kind of like help you breeze through. And I was
Mhm.
not comfortable with just breezing through. Like I'm the kind of person where if I feel something, I just want to let myself feel it. And so
Yeah.
um I think my friend, her name was Kaylee. Hi, Kaylee, if you're saying this. I think my friend Kaylee just kind of noticed it, and she and I had been well. She we knew each other in middle school as well, and so I was actually a lot closer to her mom, and so
Mhm.
yeah, so she invited us, and me and my brothers, but I was the only one that went. She invited us
Mhm.
to her youth group, and I went that same day. Yep.
Okay. Wow.
Hmm.
And so when you were going through that, and I kind of want to touch on those the general statements,
Mm,
that people say. I think sometimes people have good intentions
mm, mm,
when they say things out of trying to comfort somebody, but they don't really understand that sometimes it's not helpful. And
right.
it may cause good intentions may cause even more conflict, more
Yeah.
frustration for the person, especially with something as sensitive as grief,
Right.
especially.
For
And
sure.
so, how did your journey start with mental health? And what point in your life did that begin for you?
So I a few incidences in my childhood, as well as the loss of Jacob when I was in eighth grade, kind
Mhm.
of brought me into my relationship with Christ. But it wasn't. I still like the I felt at peace majority of the time, but it also felt like my mind wasn't where I wanted it to be. I don't know how to explain it that well,
Mhm.
but um, in college is when I saw my first therapist,
Mhm.
and um, it was due to a traumatic incident that happened in college, and
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I started seeing the therapist, and um, I realized that I needed a balance
Mhm.
between me having my faith, because at this point, from eighth grade until college, a whole lot of time happened, and I was still constantly seeking after the Lord, reading scripture, meditating, doing all of those things.
Mhm.
Um, but it almost felt like there was still a block in my mind.
Mhm.
Even remembering things. This is how I know I went through several traumatic things, because I started to lose my memory,
Yeah.
and so,
Can we highlight
uh,
that a little bit? Is that okay?
sure, yeah, yeah,
So one, I love to educate, right? And
hmm,
so for those listening who have experienced trauma, memory loss is a very real thing, both long term
mm,
and short term, when you
mm,
experience trauma
hmm,
specifically. And it's really your brain's way of trying to protect you.
protect
It
you,
is a
yeah,
very natural thing that happens. And so for people that are like, "Oh, I have a terrible memory," not talking about just becoming a mom in general, that changes a lot of chemistry in your brain. But before then
right,
you weren't a mom, right?
yeah,
Let's let people know. You went to college,
right,
you weren't a mom
hmm,
then, and you're having these
correct,
memory gaps because you mentioned you went through a few incidences, not just when
hmm,
you were younger, but then also an incident there. And so your brain's ability to protect you is very incredible,
mm,
and sometimes people don't recognize that it's not just memory loss that happens, but
Mm,
also people may feel like they're living another person's life or observing their
mm,
own life, or even feeling like they're in a dreamlike state when trauma happens. It's almost like you're
mm,
living on autopilot and things are a little bit blurry and foggy.
mm.
And so I just want to educate. And so, can you continue a little bit what you were saying when you went to college? You needed to find balance.
No, yeah, no, that's it, all of that is a really great point because I didn't actually learn that until my second therapist later down the line. But that's very true. It made sense when she said it, but it took me seeing the first therapist when I was in college, and then really starting to get a feel of having both my faith and having help with some traumatic things that were out of my control that played a huge part in everything, my decisions, my how I saw myself, how I thought people saw me, like all,
Mhm.
all of those
Mhm.
things, how much I felt I was worth to people, all of
Yeah.
those things. And so that was my mindset all through college was
Mhm.
navigating through all of those thoughts and all of those feelings.
So,
And
can you highlight how those experiences impacted your beliefs about yourself? Because I don't think people understand that when you experience trauma,
mhm,
there is a lot of perception of you are unlovable, you deserve
mm,
it, nobody cares about you. The
mm,
isolation that someone experiences when you experience trauma is very
mm,
real. And so, are you
mhm.
comfortable sharing a little bit with our audience about what that was like for you?
I am, it's crazy because in college I had a vast amount of friends, and not trying to sound boastful, but I did. I was a fairly social person and I was comfortable meeting new people and hanging out and whatever. But it was like even though I knew that they cared, even though I knew that they were there, it still felt so incredibly lonely. It felt like
Right.
there could be 100 people in the room and I felt like I was still the only one in there. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
um, and it's very irrational. It doesn't make sense,
Hmm.
but that's how your brain, I think, and I'm not the specialist, but I think that's how I think that's how like your brain just copes with a lot of
Yeah.
it is trying to rationalize things, and sometimes it comes out irrationally, and so
Hmm.
um,
Did you ever
uh,
think there has to be something wrong with me?
oh, absolutely. All the time. Nothing else made sense. It was only me. It had to have been my fault. It had to have been something I did or something I said. It was never on anyone else. It wasn't until later out of college with my second therapist that she started to like help me put together the pieces. But before that, I took all of the blame and did not hesitate to either. It was
Right.
um, it, because it was like multiple events or
Mhm.
multiple people, the problem must have been me. If that
Yeah.
makes sense. Does
No,
that
of
make sense?
course, of course. It's almost like, I was telling people in my introductory and on my social media when I was talking about what inspired me to do Zyari, I was like, I felt like I had a target on my back that said, "Traumatize me,
Mm,
please." Like, I don't
mm,
understand, right?
mm-hmm,
And that can be extremely isolating, and especially how it changes your perception of yourself. Like, I deserve this. I must have done something, right?
mm-hmm,
And so, I guess this is a good segue into, how sometimes people, when you grow up in a religious home or not even a religious home, if you are in the religious culture in any type of way, it was just like, well, God must have allowed you to go through it, or you deserved it,
mm-hmm.
or you did something, that God's mad at you. So can you elaborate? Did you experience those thoughts or any
I
of
mean,
that?
now looking back, all I see is the Bible, and I see the Pharisees. When you say that, they always said it. It must have been your parents' sins that
Mhm, mhm.
brought this upon you. But I mean this is part of what comes living in a broken world. These unfortunately these things
Right.
happen, and I laugh, but it's not funny. But unfortunately, like you go through traumatic stuff, you go through things, and I think that's why it's so important for the church to start acknowledging that we can't just kind of brush it under the rug. It doesn't, even if the person isn't talking about it anymore, or they're not, it doesn't look like they're experiencing those feelings anymore, it doesn't mean that they're gone. It just means they probably got pretty good at hiding it.
Mhm.
Which means it's still there, they're still feeling it, they're still struggling with it, and your church body isn't what you think it is. You know what I mean? So
What do you
um,
mean by that?
well, I mean, like, we, you're, let me see how I want to how I want to phrase this. You're as the leader of your church, how people can tell if your church is really thriving and growing is by the fruit that it bears, and so if
Mhm.
you have several people in your congregation that are still constantly struggling with either the same issue, or in the concept, the realm of similar issues, and that means that it's not being dealt with, which as a leader is your responsibility. And so
Mhm.
I really would like to start seeing leaders of our churches take more responsibility, take more into consideration what it looks like practically for people to start getting the healing that they need. um, that, yes, I would always encourage you uh, to um, find a group of people that can pray with you and pray over you. I believe that, I do. I just think that it's more than that. It's there. We have tools that can help us. We have people that understand how the mind works.
Mhm.
And although you are in a leadership position, that does not mean that you're qualified to um, um, tend
Treat
to
something as
someone,
delicate as
treat
mental health.
treat right treat
Yes.
something like depression, or
Yeah.
PTSD, or all of those things. Like, I
So are
know
you
there's a
saying,
lot of,
Laura, that you can't just pray mental health away? Is that what you're saying? Because we
I
hear a
I
lot of that in the church is just pray about it. You'll be fine, right?
I believe that there is so much power in prayer, but I don't think that praying alone, uh, faith without works is dead. You can
Yeah.
have all of the faith, but if you're not working towards, getting where you need to be, and a lot of times you cannot do that alone,
Mhm.
you're not going to get to a place of healing. You're not going to get to a
Yeah.
place of peace. So
I love
I
how
don't.
you said practicality. I love how
Mhm,
you said that give them practical things
mhm,
because there's also this thing that I heard a lot in like religious circles where it's like, oh, you must not have enough faith if nothing
mhm,
has changed. If
mhm,
you're praying, you're not reading your Bible enough, or you're not praying enough. You don't have. It's
mhm,
almost like victim blaming. It's almost
mhm,
like re-traumatizing the
mhm,
person
mhm,
and putting them back in the position of it's my fault
mhm.
again.
I mean, between that and it underlying, it kind of feels like, if you're not doing something, you're not saved. If you're not, you know what
Right.
I mean? And that's completely against what Yeshua said. So yeah, yeah. I,
Yeah,
I
I would like to ask you, like, how do you think that prioritizing like the religious beliefs or those religious like common things that are said by people
mm,
um negatively impacts someone that has mental health, or did you experience any of that yourself?
sure. Let me just say that prioritizing your relationship with Christ and living by the Word of God is never going to negatively impact your well being, okay? But I can see how some practices and mindsets in the Christian church, or I guess any church, can hinder someone from getting the support that they need for their mental health. When you don't have adequate support that you need, whatever it is that you're going through, yes, you can see people continuing to struggle and
Mhm.
possibly even getting led into a deeper, darker place than where they
Mhm.
were before.
Right.
You have some people that don't even want to acknowledge that mental health is even an issue,
Yeah.
um,
Mhm.
that needs our immediate attention, or either because they don't see it much in our history, which I've heard that before,
Right.
or they think that it's just this new age thing.
Right.
Um, or on the other end, you have people in positions of leadership in the church that focus so much more on following the waves of like trends and the
Mhm.
culture, and
Mhm.
are comfortable negating the Bible entirely. So you see it, both ends.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
But I
you're
do
saying
think.
that, like, there's a balance between, like, knowing when you I think you're making a separation and a distinction between
Hmm.
religion and
Hmm.
cultural beliefs and
Yeah,
practices versus
for
having a
sure.
personal relationship.
I, I have to be direct in that, because
Mhm,
relationship with Christ and reading scripture is always going to bring about healing. It
mhm,
it wouldn't be Christ, it wouldn't be God if it didn't, you
mhm.
know. But the way that the church is right now and the way that religion looks right now is not the same thing. It isn't.
I
So
think
I, I,
that's why
I
a
do.
lot
I
of
have to.
people go ahead, finish your
No, no,
thought.
no, 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 no. Well, I was just gonna say. Well, no, no. Go ahead, because now I've lost
I
my.
was going to highlight that I would bet to say that that is why a lot of people that are in our age group don't want anything to do with church, because what I've noticed is that this trend, people were like, they're seeking spiritualities. Like, I want
Mhm,
connection. I want to seek what's out there. There's something bigger, there's something greater that I want to be a part of, but I don't like that. Like what
mhm,
and a lot of the things that I hear in the circles are, I don't like the way the church is. Let's talk about, like, it seems like you said that's how you know it's a good church if they're producing good fruit,
mhm,
versus the Western thought of how many likes, how many members, how many
mhm,
people can I have, right? Like, it's all about popularity and status versus, are we nurturing each other? Are we
mhm,
loving each other where we are? And it's almost
mhm,
like I hear from a lot of people that they're like, no, like, I would get struck by lightning if I could step into a church, right? Because they
mhm,
hear, come as you are, but not like that.
mhm,
And I think our generation has a hard time accepting a culture or perhaps religion or a standard that is practiced out of
mhm,
habit, and
mhm,
seeing the misinformation or the hypocrisy
mhm,
that is happening right
mhm.
now in the culture.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a little disheartening, because especially like looking at the leadership, the fact that you're focusing more on being trendy and keeping up with the numbers, than if your congregation is actually getting healing. And I think
Mhm.
I think overlooking that is so dangerous. But
Mhm.
yeah.
What is healing? Like, I think we should highlight that a little bit, because what does it look like to be spiritual, right?
Hmm.
With, I'm sure people were like, with a powerful God who says he heals, right?
Hmm.
But you need to go seek help from someone.
Hmm. It I'll say it doesn't look like you've got it all together. It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like the world is in the palm of your hands. It's nothing like that. It looks like um, every day it's a little better, because here's the thing: we live in a sinful world. We live in a world that is fallen and is broken, and nothing is ever going to be perfect.
Right.
Nothing is ever going to be exactly how you want it.
Right.
So when you do have, you may struggle with one thing in your teens and struggle with something completely different when you're in your 20s, and then for some reason that teens thing comes back when you're in your 30s, and
Yeah.
it's just kind of one of those things that you're constantly growing. You learn something different every time. And
Mhm.
that's the beauty about having a relationship with Christ and being consistent in your word and consistent in prayer, is because you are continuing to grow and continuing to learn, and that is where the healing comes from.
Right.
But it's never going to be you're never going to have just this perfect life. And I feel so this is why I limit how much I go onto Instagram, and
Mhm.
I have a TikTok, but like just barely, but like that's the reason why. It's because we live in a culture, especially here in the US, where everyone wants to portray this perfect, I get to
Yes.
travel and do this and do that, but aren't as quick to show you when they're struggling. And that this is where the imbalances come from, is because all we
Right.
see is all of these happy faces, and no one's showing
Mhm.
you the sad moments as well. And so yeah, I think healing is being able, you may kind of even be in it just a little bit, but like being able to like look back and explain that to someone and show that to someone. Because if you
Mhm.
can't share those testimonies, then you're blocking an opportunity for someone else to heal from something that they're probably going along with you, in their own
Yes.
way, so um,
Yes.
to
I
me, I think healing is growth. Healing
Yeah.
is every day taking one step closer to a more peaceful, a more joyful
Mhm.
life. Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard because I love how you said it's not perfection.
Hmm.
Because we have this idea that that's what healing is. I think I have clients. I told a client the other day, um, it's a client that struggles a lot with depression and has
Hmm.
for a long time, right?
Yeah.
And switched to me due to some circumstances that his other therapist was going in her life, right?
Mm,
And he tells me, I just don't want to be depressed anymore. And I asked him, like, well, what do
mm,
you think healing would look like? You think that it eliminates the feeling of sadness or that
mm,
it will eliminate depression
mm,
altogether? And he was like, well, yeah. And I said, okay. So I was like, that's not life.
mm,
I think it's an unrealistic belief that we have
mhm,
that healing looks like everything is okay all the time.
mhm,
And I would challenge that. I would challenge that because that's not what healing looks like. Healing looks like I can experience pain and I know how to come out of it. I
mhm,
know how to lean on others when I need to. I can
mm,
experience happiness in the same way that I allow myself to experience sadness. I
mm,
know when to be defensive and when to be protective. I
mm.
know when to feel guilt and I know when not to feel guilty.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
almost like, everything has its time, everything has its balance. And I told him, I was like, it's not about being okay all the time or being happy. That's delusional. That's not
Right.
allowing yourself to be human.
Right. Oh yeah. Mhm.
And
That's
so
good.
seeking spirituality, right? Seeking God by itself, because some people I've even heard the other extreme, I just need God and nobody else, right?
Mm.
And I'm like, well, if that's true, why are we born into relationship?
Mhm.
Like you said, like maybe the church doesn't have all the answers.
Mhm.
You do need to get help from somebody else
Mhm.
because we were made for connection. The
Mhm.
one thing that connects all of us is imperfection.
Mhm.
It's the fact that we experience ups and downs in life. And so guess what? I would dare to say, no, God is not enough
Mm.
to fix all these things. He didn't design this world to be that way. If that was the case, then we wouldn't seek love from
Mm.
our parents, from others, from we were meant to lean on each other. And I think that a lot of people stray away from the thought
Mm.
of the importance of relationship with others.
Mm.
And then wonder, why are you feeling so upset and sad and depressed? Oh, it's because you can't connect with yourself and you can't connect with others, whether it's through trauma or through a bad event or something or self isolation.
Mm.
People
I
don't
think
understand the effects of it.
I think one thing I would challenge is just that, because I can see a little bit of an uproar when people hear that God is not enough, right?
That's okay. I'm okay with the
but
uproar. That's fine.
but what I think is like, I think as a body we tend to like put all of these limitations on God,
Mhm, mhm.
and I can have God in my spiritual life and also find him in my therapy life as well. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like in that sense, I think God is more than enough, but I don't think I don't think limiting him into one area or one aspect of your life is saying that that is all God is. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Like
Yeah.
you'll find him in the butterflies outside, like just having
Mhm,
that overwhelming sense of peace, having that Holy Spirit overwhelmed sense of peace.
right.
You'll find him, especially if you find a really great, like you, a really great therapist that can
Mhm,
bring back biblical concepts and like help you like really hone in on how to combine and connect the two.
mhm.
You can find God in so many different areas and aspects. It's just a matter of opening yourself up to that,
Right.
and not limiting God.
Yeah.
Limiting God is what putting him in that box is what hinders you from getting the full
Right. It's
healing.
it's only it's only saying that I can only experience God in church. And I
Right.
think that's what I'm trying to get at is that
Right.
and for full disclosure, I believe in Yeshua. Like
Hmm.
I am not if the audience is listening, Do not get off put by other people's religions, like, I have clients that when I tell them, like, "Yeah, they ask me about my faith, I'm very open." They're like, "I would have never guessed." And I'm like, "Because I know a time and place,"
Mm,
right? It is not my job to convert you, I guess,
mhm,
right? In therapy. It's my job to meet you where you are,
mm,
period. And I think that we get mistaken and try to play the role of God,
mm,
and we hurt people more. Our role in this world is to, what does it say? Love your neighbor as you love yourself. So what does that
mm,
say? Oh, I got to learn to love myself.
mm.
So guess what? If you're not treating your neighbor well, my assumption as a therapist
Yeah.
is you don't love yourself.
Mm,
If you're super critical of other people, guess what? That tells me that you have a super critical voice inside your own head about yourself.
mm,
And so what I mean to say is that God is not enough. If God was enough, then he would have just been, "Hey, Adam, it's just us, buddy."
mm,
Right? But he said, "I'm gonna give you Eve. I'm gonna give you somebody else." And so it's people just seeking the answer in a specific setting. You're right. God can be anywhere
mm,
and will speak through you through anything. And
mm.
so, guess what? He's not limited to the four walls of a church,
Yeah.
right? Faith is not limited to the four walls of a church.
Mhm,
You have other people that God blessed with knowledge, right? If God was enough, don't go to the doctor when
mm,
you're sick. Pray about it. If God was enough, don't go to school and go to college. He'll give you the job that you want, even though there's a requirement of specific things to have. Just pray
mm,
about it.
mhm.
Do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
And I know it's controversial, and that's okay because those are limiting beliefs that keep us
Mm,
stuck.
mm. Yeah.
We have to get out of this idea that God, like you said, is limited to a specific place, time, and whatever. Like he will
Yeah.
use anybody and anything, just like you
Mhm,
said. It said, "I'll use the rocks to worship me."
mm.
Right? So, with that being said, like, how can individuals balance the spiritual or religious practices with the need to address mental health issues? Does it mean that you don't believe in God any more or any less because you went to seek a therapist?
So, um, I think repeat the question because I want to make sure that I answer it.
No, you're good. How can individuals balance their spiritual or religious practices with the need to address mental health? And does that mean that you believe any less, makes you any less spiritual because you have to address something as
Right.
mental health?
Okay. So the first thing I want to say is don't think that you have to sacrifice one in order to have the other. I think that's so important. For when two or three are gathered together in my name, there I'm in the midst, right? Um, and I think a lot of times people just associate that with their church leadership or whatever. That applies to when you're needing to seek help as well.
Mhm,
You can have a thriving relationship with Yeshua and still be struggling mentally.
mhm,
That happens. It's okay. It is normal. This world is full of hardships, and I will always suggest for someone to seek the Lord. But depending on the conversation and the situation, I may also suggest for that person to find hopefully a God-fearing therapist who they trust. Someone who will lead them back to the truth, and offer biblical and practical advice,
mhm,
um, and also encourage strategies for that person to practice in between those
mhm,
sessions and all of that. But I mean, even if you are still on the fence about therapy and you're not ready to take that dive, I would say find someone with accountability. I always would stress a, a therapist, someone that is licensed, because they have spent time and attention and money in learning about the brain, learning about our hormones, learning about our emotions, all of that. So you have a better chance at finding the healing that you need through someone who has learned you know, versus someone that is in your church. And I don't want to sound disrespectful, but
mhm,
um, someone that is in your church that is in a leadership position, but has their own, um, they may be going through the very thing that you're going through, struggling with, and
Mhm.
they haven't figured out how to overcome it. So it's kind
Right.
of, yeah. I would say
Yeah.
first, for sure, just know that you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. You can have both.
Right.
You know, that
That
is
is
okay.
so wise. I love that answer because we are very extreme. I think it's like no, I need to be this or that. No, it's like
Mhm.
you can't be it all. But in certain situations, it's good to find a balance. I
Mhm.
had a hard time reconciling the fact that I had faith, that I was, raised in church, right?
Mhm.
And this idea of perfection. Like, nope,
Mhm.
I need to be perfect. I need to not do all these things. And you know what? I never understood what the Bible said when it said knowledge puffs up.
Mhm.
And I was like, hold on. And so for me, through achieving perfection, I read the Bible a lot. I read a lot of like books on a whole bunch of stuff. And I was like, I need to be perfect at this thing, right? I need to be the
Mhm.
perfect Christian, whatever that looks like, right? And puffs up means it makes you self-righteous and it
Mhm.
brings all this pride. And
Mhm.
while you're doing what you think is something good, if your religion or if what you're practicing is causing you, again, love others,
Mhm.
to hate other people or to treat them negatively, I think is a staple that I view someone's, I guess, walk or spirituality is how well do they treat someone else?
Mhm. Oh, for
How
sure.
well do they love someone through their pain?
Mhm.
How well do they accept someone where they are
Mhm.
without judgment? And
Mhm.
that is hard because here I
And
was comparing
it's
myself to other people.
especially someone that they're very close with. You know, like
Yeah.
they're people can be very good at portraying this to people, to their
Mhm.
friends or those that don't really know them. But yeah, I agree for sure.
Mhm. You can be, and again, it's not to bash anybody in leadership. You
Mhm.
can be the best pastor in the world. You know how I will determine how good of a pastor you are? How well do you treat your wife?
Mhm.
Do your kids say they love you?
Mhm.
Do you sacrifice your family at the expense of saying, I need to go and be a good pastor?
Mhm.
Because last I checked, again, love thyself and your responsibility is to your family.
Mhm.
Everything else comes later. And I
Mhm.
think we have this unhealthy relationship with perfection that makes us put a facade of who we want others to think we are. But
Mhm.
internally, you're full of pride, you're full of hate, you're full of jealousy, and people could see it. You're full of bitterness. And
Mhm.
we can call that out and we can expect. I didn't even know that I was self-righteous until I look back at my life and I was like, dang, I really used to like internally in my heart judge other people
Mhm.
because they were not perfect,
Mhm.
thinking I am perfect.
Mhm. Yeah, and like I we mentioned earlier, I'm the exact opposite in that. And I like, even you inviting me on the podcast, I was like, why me? You know? But like on, on the other end of that, wanting that perfection and thinking like that is what I should be striving for, when there in no way am I going to achieve that in this life. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So being comfortable and uh, confident in the fact that these baby steps is going to get me to,
Mhm.
a more peaceful and closer place in relationship with Yeshua. But I don't need it to be perfect. It's
Yeah.
not going to be, So
Mhm.
yeah, I can
It's
see.
not it's not about perfection because it's like, I think I was at the lowest part of my life where I was just doing my own thing, right? And I was like, God, I really don't care. Don't talk to me. Like, I'm gonna do
Mm,
my own thing. I went through my divorce. I went through domestic violence. I went through a lot of crazy stuff. And I was like, God,
mm,
I got that from following you. I don't want nothing to do with it, right?
mm, mhm,
And I had a situation where I went and I had like a friend with benefits. First time in my life. And yes, guys, I did that. I'm not perfect. I'm vulnerable. People can learn from that. And
mhm.
I remember coming home and I was like taking a shower and I heard God talk to me and no, I'm not crazy, right? I heard a still small voice say I love you right after I just got done hanging out my boo thing, right?
Mm.
And I was like, don't be talking. This is the most inappropriate time to be telling me that you love me. Like I done like, have my friend with benefits. We was Netflix and chilling, right? And like, you mean you love me, right? Right? Like I was like, don't be talking to me like that. And then I heard the voice again. No, I love
Mhm,
you. And I'm like, okay. And I was just getting annoyed at that point. And it was like,
mhm,
I heard it again. I love you. And for some reason, like, I just broke down crying.
Mm.
And I was like, "You can't love me like this." Again,
Mm.
this whole perfection thing, right?
Mhm.
Like, "You can't love me like this. I'm, like, at the lowest point of my life. I'm not even trying to talk to you." Like,
Mm.
and I just cried, and he's just like, "Now you understand what grace looks like and what it
Mm.
means to be naked before me." Adam and Eve were naked, and that's vulnerability.
Mm.
It's understanding that he sees our vulnerability, understanding that he sees our flaws, right? And he
Yeah.
said, perfection, right? Life is not about perfection. It's about holding the hand of the one who is
Mm.
and walking with me anyway, knowing that you're not perfect.
Mm.
I would have never got that before when I was
Yeah.
Bible thumping, when I was doing all the things, right?
Thinking we know everything. We've got it. We've read it all. We've got it all figured out.
I got it,
Yeah.
right? And so I would like for you to highlight and talk about a little bit of on your end. You said I was the complete opposite. What did that look like for you? What?
So, like I said, I did not grow up in the church. My parents divorced when I want to say like 3. My dad is Catholic. He doesn't
Mhm.
practice, but he's Catholic. My mom is, I say it, my mom is Christian. So she's going to be watching this. She's Christian, but they like neither of them really like practice it heavy, especially when I was younger and growing up. And so, there was a lot of abandonment I felt
Mhm.
from both sides, and a lot of confusion on where my value was, because my dad
Mhm.
had a family of his own and whatever,
Mhm.
and I always felt like I was kind of put on the back burner on my dad's side of the family. And then my mom, but for the most part, she was a single mom to 4 kids, and she tried the best she could.
Right.
But a lot of time that meant that I didn't get a lot of one-on-one with her that I feel like, especially growing up, that I really could have benefited from. And so it was just
Mhm.
a lot of insecurity, a lot of abandonment issues, a lot of just not knowing my worth, basically. And
Mhm.
so for me, when I started my relationship with Christ, it was, like I said about the podcast, it was like, why me, God? Why are you choosing? Because I knew from the very beginning that He could choose, who He brought into His family. And so
Mhm.
I was so confused on why, like, what was it about me? Like, whatever it is, I want to, accent those things. I want to work on those things. I want to get better at those things.
Mhm.
But I never felt good enough. Never felt good
Mhm.
enough. I don't want to bring up this, but even with my high
Go
school
ahead. Go ahead. I know what you're
relationship.
saying. Go ahead. Go for it. Go for it. I am an
even with
open book.
Listen, guys, you guys don't know this, but you guys do know this, but me and JoJo know each other. And the reason why is because my high school love of my life left me for her, guys. So even that, but like, no, I mean, we joke about it, and really, like, looking back, it is very funny, but like, in the time it played into, like, how I saw myself, like
Yeah.
this guy that, I met at church, and, we hung out all the time. Now all of a sudden wants someone else. And I'm like, why was I not good enough? Like,
Yeah.
why? So it was just a lot of me questioning myself. Like, even now when I sit down and I have conversations with friends about the Bible, I'm more quiet than I do speak. And a lot of the times it's because I question, like, do I know enough about this topic?
Mhm. Mhm.
And it all boiled down to, like, how confident I was to,
Mhm.
to talk to people about Christ. And so yeah, I
Yeah.
was the complete opposite from you, girl.
No, and so to answer your question, why I chose you to be in the podcast is because of that right there, is that you have such a tender heart. And I think that even like how we knew each other, I didn't know if you were gonna bring
Mm.
it up or not, but that's okay.
I don't mind. It's fun. I mean, we joke about it now, and
Yeah.
everyone has such a beautiful life now. I'm
Mhm.
thankful for that. But yeah, it was
Just to
interesting at the time.
clarify, he did not cheat. by the
No, no,
way.
no, no.
I don't want people to, like, if they know who he
I
is, to think that he
I
did
never
not.
assume I never assume that anyhow. It's just how I responded to the whole situation kind of led
Mhm.
me into, yeah. I never thought
Yeah.
that. I never did.
No, I
Yeah.
know. I just want people to, like, if they know him or you, or they
Yeah.
like, he didn't do any of that,
Don't
like,
come for him. He's still cool. Like,
very honorable guy,
yeah.
like No, but it's just very interesting, and that is why I picked you, because even then, and I wanna just encourage you, in your own walk, like, you have a good and tender heart, and
Mm,
you are worthy of love. I mean, by the way, y'all, she is married, obviously, has her 4 babies,
yeah.
right? And I'm also married to another guy that's not the same guy.
Yeah.
And have our own kids. But you, even through the situation, like, you moved with grace,
Mm,
and you weren't, like, nasty or bitter or any of that, I guess, like, not that I saw. And, like, we still, like, remained friends. And what I found was interesting was that you you never and that could be a trauma response. So I do want to educate people too about what happens is, like, so when you experience trauma, one of four things can happen, if it's consistent. It's You become a fighter,
mm,
you very defensive, everything's a fight, people, no matter what with who, right?
mm.
You become a runner. That was me. Like, nope, gotta go, right? Leave the situation, moving on. I was moving everywhere, couldn't keep a job. Like,
Mm,
you're a runner. You're a pleaser, which
mm.
is, I'm assuming, what happened on your end, because you're just like, no, keep the peace, right?
Yeah.
Or you're a number, where, like, you
Mm,
numb your emotions, you numb
mm,
everything, and you just kind of shut down, and, like, you just coast and you're just living, right?
mm,
And so, did that pleaser come out, throughout your life and situations? Because I remember even then you were like, "Oh, I still want to be your friend," and I felt,
mm.
like, weird about, like, "Oh my gosh, like, I didn't mean to do that." Like, it was just, like, a weird situation for me. But
It
can
was
you
out of your control,
educate?
first of all.
Go ahead, go ahead.
It was completely out of I didn't I was very hurt, and I that was probably my first and biggest, like, heartbreak. But I don't think I was ever angry. Again, just a lot of confusion and whatever. So I'm, for the most part, I'm a pretty passive person. I don't like confronting people or situations. Um, so I think probably in that instance, well, no, I would say for that particular instance, I did become a little numb. I
Mhm,
made Shortly after this, I made some very poor choices, and
mhm,
it just brought me into a little bit more of a darker place. But like, it was like a combination of the numb and me just wanting to keep the peace. I didn't want to hurt
mhm,
anybody. I didn't want anyone
mhm.
to feel guilty or anything like that. I just wanted to figure out how I could get through it. Like,
Like,
how
y'all,
to,
like, Laura apologized to me, like, when this was happening, and I was like, "I did not expect an apology," like, and I wasn't trying to play Mr. Steal Your Man, like, for people that I was not doing any of that.
yeah.
'Cause people had that misconception
I
about me. I was
remember that. Yeah,
like
I and I felt it. I felt like I
Yeah.
needed to for whatever it was. Like, I just didn't want anyone to be hurt. I didn't want anyone
Mhm.
I didn't want to hold people back from, the potential life that we were all, because, this was towards the end of high school, and, now
Mhm.
people are starting to, like, figure out what they want their lives to look like, and all of that. So I didn't want to be the reason why anyone was hindered or anything like that. So yeah, I was willing to apologize for whatever it was that,
I love your heart, though, and you are very you are someone that talks about faith a lot, and so I wanted to bring something different into the podcast, because
Mm,
it's mostly about mental health. And
mm,
but I when you said, like, yes, I have struggled with mental health, for some reason I was like, let me reach out to her, because I don't know why, but I feel like, you'd be a good person. And then you're like, yes, I've dealt with mental health and I'm a person of faith, and I was like, perfect, let's talk
yeah,
about it,
yeah,
you know because there is the big, like, clash, like, when we say, like, God is not enough, right?
mhm,
It's not, um it's not something that I'm trying to highlight and say that God doesn't work, or God doesn't,
Right.
like, I don't think I would be where I am today if it wasn't for my faith and,
Mhm.
like, my walk on my own journey
Right.
spiritually. But I think that there is, like you said, the perfection in the church of, you can't look like this, you can't struggle with these things, or you can't, because and it's not to say that um it's intentional. I would like to say that some people don't know how to accept where someone is in their life.
Right. Mhm.
Whether my struggles look different than yours, and that's okay, but just a word of caution for religious leaders, out of your good intentions, you can cause someone to spiral even more into depression,
Mhm.
even more into what they're struggling with, and damage their perception of God.
Mm.
If you tell someone, just pray about it. Well, I am praying about it and it's not happening. God must not love me.
Mm.
That is something that I've heard and that I've seen
Mhm.
as a therapist. And you can't, and when people tell me, oh, I know mental health, and I'm like, you know, aspects of you've
Mhm.
read maybe the five love languages. Which is a great book, by the way. I love
It
it.
is, yeah.
If Dr. Gary Chapman, if you hear me out there, like, I love your work. Or they read Boundaries, right? And they think they know mental health. And I'm like, no, you know, a very small bit of mental health. And it's so intricate. I
Mm.
think that God made us in such an intricate, delicate way that unless you study it,
Mm.
unless you know what you're doing, you can be
Right.
placing blame, placing
Mhm.
shame,
Mhm.
placing more doubt into someone, and you're really doing the image of God a disfavor
Yeah.
when you are saying something and you are not qualified to help someone where they are.
Right.
I'm not saying don't pray for them. I'm not saying do whatever, but statements like just pray about it,
Mhm.
statements like, well, you must not have enough faith,
Mm.
are very hurtful for people that are already experiencing trauma, depression,
Right.
shame, and guilt.
Right. Mhm.
Do you have anything to say on that topic, Laura? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, no, no. I'm enjoying listening. Listening as well. Um, I I want to say I was blessed enough after my first therapist. I had a second therapist. This was actually after I had gotten married. Still,
Mhm,
I'm married. I have kids, and I still go through, you know, a vast amount of, emotions and
mhm,
trials and all of that. My second therapist, the church that I used to go to when I was in high school, where I met Kaylee and all of that. So they actually offered. Uh, sorry, I'm getting a little teary eyed. She passed away, so now every time I think
mm.
about her, yeah. Anyways, so
I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. So I met her through my home church, and they actually offered her services. She was retired, and
Mm.
she just wanted to continue to serve. And so she,
Aw,
for no cost at all, she, took in, patients after she had retired. Um, that's what I want to see. That's what
that's
I want to
amazing.
see, because, and I mentioned earlier, my husband was talking about how there's so many people that, focus more on the profit of being a counselor or whatever.
Mhm.
And when you combine, profit and the church, of course, there's so many negative things that come out of that. And I am thankful that I got to experience what it looked like to have a church that just wanted to serve me where I was.
Wow,
You know what I mean? And
that's awesome.
I would love to see that. I would love to see
Yes,
more of that. Finding someone to
absolutely.
be on your staff that you can pay them to bring about healing upon your congregation.
Right.
Like people don't have to worry about where the money is going to come from, or
Mhm,
if all their therapist cares about is the fact that they're here for this hour and they get their $200. You know what I mean? Like
mhm.
having someone specific in your congregation that their job, their how they serve back, is being able to sit down with these families, sit down with these couples, with these
Yeah,
kids that have been through
mhm.
things, and just help
Right.
them through it. No strings attached. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that I would love to see that.
Yes, and there is such a delicate, I think, working together with people. that are qualified,
Mhm.
right? Because I've even under and again, I'm not saying this to bash anybody in leadership positions. My dad's a pastor, by the way, y'all. Like, he knows I'm talking about this stuff, and that's okay. I was like, "Hey, look, I'm gonna be talking about, you know." He's like, "Go for it. People need to be educated." I said,
Yeah.
"Okay, I'm glad." Um, but even then, like under the guise of pastoral counseling,
Mm.
when you are guiding people and you're not qualified and you're doing it through your own ego or to what you believe is right, you are
Mhm.
damaging a relationship even
Mhm.
more. You
Yeah.
know, whether it's with God or with couples, that's such an
Mm.
intricate song and dance. Even when I as a therapist, sometimes I'm like, ooh, couples therapy,
Mm.
tough, right?
Mhm.
So you're already, you know, dealing with two people who are dealing with their own things, but then throw God in the mix and you need to be doing these things because you're not,
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, you know, guilt and shame
Mm.
are the things that I see the most that cause my clients to go into depression. Guilt and
Mhm.
shame, and like what you said, abandonment, parents,
Mhm.
parental wounds. And I don't think people get it that you can be placing, you literally are handing someone guilt and shame
Yeah.
when
Mhm.
you're not understanding the state of where someone is at mentally.
Mhm. Yeah.
And you're doing it under the guise of pastoral counseling.
Mhm.
Stay in your lane. I'm not trying to be funny. I'm not trying to be bashful. I'm not trying to be
Mhm.
disrespectful. But if I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to do surgery on somebody.
Mhm.
And when you're talking about mental health, if you are not a therapist or if you are not qualified, into those who are paying for a life coach or whatever it is or anything else that is not qualified to
Mhm.
help you,
Mhm.
err on the side of caution.
Yeah.
People need to learn that this is a very delicate thing that should not be played with and should not definitely be throwing the name of God out there
Mhm.
and causing more damage to the name of God.
Yeah.
I saw your eyes go big when I was
Oh,
talking about
well,
self-help.
especially the life coach. My husband and I talked about that last night too. So you're checking off all of the boxes today.
You know, that's the inspiration actually, like, behind making, Zyari, right? Was to educate people because I've seen so much and like, "Oh, follow me. I know what I'm
Mm,
talking about." And, like,
mm.
it sounds great. They are great salesmen, don't get
Oh
me
yeah.
wrong.
Oh
And then
yeah.
you go look at them and it's like, you don't even have the credentials.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that credentials are everything, but they mean something. Y'all,
Sure.
I spent thousands of when I say thousands, I didn't just go get a bachelor's degree. Like, I didn't even wanna go to grad school, honestly. Like,
Mhm.
I really didn't, and I was like, I didn't even wanna be a I didn't like people.
Mm.
I I was just so sick of people. I'm not even gonna lie. I'm not even gonna lie. I felt God was like, "You gonna be a therapist," and I'm like, "Huh, that's cute. That's not gonna be me." And, you know, honestly, though, like, I applied to business school, and I applied to a social worker at UTA, and I was like, "Okay, you trying to be funny. I'm gonna get accepted where I'm gonna get accepted, God, and you
Mm.
better pay for it if it's social work because 'cause I'm not doing it."
Mm.
Tell me why I got accepted. And then the counselor reached out to me. He was like, "Oh, you're military? We have all this money for you
Mm.
to be able to go to school." And I was like, I can't deny that. You know, I was still in my phase of I don't want to deal with none of that. You know, I hated people. You know,
You're
I
like,
had
all
to go through
right,
my own journey.
I'll just make it plain. I'll make it easy for you.
Right. I was so mad. I'm not gonna lie, I was salty. I was salty. But now I'm grateful that I went through that journey. And I'm grateful
Mm,
that I went through my own spiritual journey with God, right? Because
mm,
now, like, when I could tell you, like, I made Zyari to help people because I was tired of self-help gurus preaching
mm,
out of their own egos. You
mhm,
know, again, not bashing pastors and pastoral counseling, but again, teaching about things they don't know about and maybe causing more damage out of good intentions.
mm.
Nobody's saying they're doing it. It's like taking accountability means taking accountability for the fact that you are damaging. It doesn't matter whether your intentions were there or not.
Right. Mhm,
But part of taking accountability is like, dang, maybe I should tell them to go seek help. Or
mhm.
for the churches that do have a lot of money, go hire somebody to be a part of your
Yeah,
staff to go
for
do
sure.
this.
Mhm. Yeah.
Because it is a journey and it is very delicate.
Mhm.
And even us therapists, like my therapist I was going to for a long time, she was like, you need to seek I'm going to refer you to a trauma specialized therapist
Mm,
because you've been through a lot of trauma.
mm.
And then boom, like led me in that direction. Even in the therapy world, some people are like, nope, not in
Yeah,
my field.
yeah,
Go here,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So, if anything, you could leave the audience with Laura today. What would you want them to get from today's session?
Okay. Um, okay, I want to read some scripture and then I'll follow that up with something, okay?
Hmm.
Let's see. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Um, the God that wants you to struggle and suffer and live your life in loneliness, he doesn't exist. Or if he does, he's not the God of the Bible. Okay? Even Job in the Old Testament, uh, one of the greatest examples of suffering, in chapter 12, he starts off acknowledging that God is the greatest comforter and the greatest counselor. But then in chapter 29, he becomes the counselor. He says, people listen to me expectantly, waiting in silence for my counsel. Um, the Lord our God does not want us to suffer. And he surely doesn't want us to live in loneliness. There are people who have been called to counsel. So even if you're not quite ready to take the leap towards someone professional, start smaller. Always seek God, but it is okay to have both. It is okay to be on this journey in your relationship with Christ and on a journey to heal yourself in your mind and in your heart. That's okay. It's okay. You are loved. I pray that you find the church body that will support you in that. And I really pray that more, especially these huge churches that have such massive congregations, will also start supporting that for you because you deserve it.
That was so beautiful, Laura. I loved it. Well, thank you so much for being on this podcast and helping shed light between mental health and religion and how to balance the two. You're really insightful.
Thank you. I'm glad you had me. This was fun. This was great.